early on in the morning, there seemed to be a really big bombshell when he was getting questioning from a Democratic Congressman, Ted Lieu from California, and asked this very question on if it had not been for the Justice Department guidelines that a sitting president can't be indicted, would you have charged President Trump with obstruction of justice? And Mueller said yes. And that seemed to be a really big moment. Then later in the afternoon, Mueller walked back that statement saying, I actually misspoke. And what I meant to say was that we never even considered any kind of illegality from the president or even considered charges because you can't indict a sitting president. Now, to me, the distinction is still very important. And it went from a bombshell to kind of more this was the kind of the mission that Mueller had from the beginning, and that for him to kind of end up having any charges on this issue was always going to be a very steep climb.
As we talk about Robert Mueller today and some of the response that his, for lack of a better word, performance induced from some of the people who watched it today, I think some were even being critical as to whether or not he thoroughly knew the report that has his name on it. What is your take from that and how he spoke to the lawmakers today? What was the feel from him?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a virtuoso performance, and certainly for people who've actually studied his past performance on Capitol Hill when he was the head of the FBI and a high-ranking Justice Department official, this was probably not one of his better performances, somebody who hasn't done this in a while. But I would actually just give him some fairness that this was a really tough assignment, doing this for 7 hours, tough questions from Democrats and Republicans when members of Congress are asking, well, I want you to refer to page 80 in Volume 2, Section 7, and have him read it and recite it and try to the best of his memory. I think that's a tough assignment for almost anybody. And it was clear that he was much stronger later in the afternoon when the subject was about Russia's interference rather than the obstruction of justice. But to me, probably the biggest liability that he had was that he would not answer a lot of questions from members of Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, because he didn't want to wade into waters that he did not want to go down. He spoke about the issues he wanted to talk about, which made him have to deflect on so many other questions.
Mark, a lot of people were hoping this would be a big moment today, that this would sway the opinion of some lawmakers, that maybe some Republicans would cross over and start to deal with the Republicans when it came to discussions about impeachment, or vice versa, that some Democrats would say, look, there's not enough here, maybe we should move on from this. Did you think anything was actually accomplished, or are we still on the hamster wheel?
Yeah, to me, the biggest takeaway of the last 2.5 years of President Trump's presidency is that I think a lot of minds have been made up, and that we're only talking about a sliver of the electorate who will end up having their minds made up on an issue, particularly like this. But because of how complex and complicated this entire story is, and whether it's about the Russian interference or any kind of obstruction of justice when it came to the Russian interference investigation, to me, if you did pay attention, you ended up getting a lot of clarity from somebody whose voice we wanted to hear from. So maybe no bombshells, but certainly for the issues that he decided to speak about, and when he did decide to speak, I think a lot of people listened and learned.
NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray, thank you for taking some time and talking to our viewers today.
Thank you for having me.